Let's talk about witchcraft activism.
If you would like to learn about fairy folklore, delve into modern fairy faith spirituality, and explore fun and fanciful fairy-themed events, please subscribe to Fairy Fortunes for new videos every Friday.
Hello, my fair friends. I'm Ruby Ruse, and today on Fairy Fortunes, I'd like to talk about the very timely book, Witchcraft Activism, by David Salisbury. David Salisbury describes himself as a queer vegan witch who is a devotee of the goddess Hecate. He is a high priest of the Coven of the Spiral Moon, and he works with an organization, and I think he's the founder of an organization called the Firefly House, which I will have linked for you in the description box down below. This book was published in 2019, but I actually came across it this year, 2022, on Instagram for Weiser Books, which is one of the main pagan publishers of pagan books in the United States and Western world. And it was right around the time that the Ukraine war began. And I felt so helpless and lost in how to help the people in the Ukraine that are suffering still as of this recording. I was hoping that this book would inspire me to use my magical practice in a way to give me hope, to inspire me to do something, to feel like I was being useful and helping people that are in a situation that at this point in my life where I really have no frame of reference for. I can't even imagine what these people are going through in the Ukraine. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It's very easy to read. It's in a very clear and concise format that you don't get lost with. So I really did enjoy the experience of reading this book. He does very much give some specific ways to channel magical power. I think what's particularly beautiful about this book is that the title is absolutely true to form. This is Witchcraft Activism. He is absolutely, David Salisbury is absolutely looking through activism through a magical lens. And he gives you these really great ideas to infuse your magic into acts of activism. And he also brings up a point that I think is so important, that he encourages the idea of small actions having powerful impact. So it seems like such a mundane and innocuous things, but one of the inspirations that I took from this book was the idea of writing letters, of using the power of the written word to convey intention, which is in essence what a spell is. A spell is very much about your intention. And there's just so many ways to incorporate writing into magical power, and the idea of seeking out people who are allies that have more power than yourself to align with and get aid to where it needs to go. And the beautiful thing about writing a letter is, especially when you sign your name to that letter, you can infuse your writing implement and turn it into an athame or turn it into a wand and make that writing implement a magical tool in and of itself to really focus your intention and your ideas and what you're trying to accomplish. Another thing that I really loved about this book was the notion of really doing your research. Let's say you do choose to do that small action of writing letters. Well, who are you going to write those letters to? You need to prepare your research and really almost even create dossiers on your potential allies that these letters are going to. And also he encourages you to think about the people that are going to be obstacles in your path, and really delving into why those people might be presenting those obstacles. what is their driving force? What is their intention? And really creating for yourself a plan of action. For a person like me, whenever I create a spell, they are very thorough, they're very meticulous and very detailed. And so this really appealed to me, of really creating a packet of information on the issue that has pulled at your heart and inspired you to take action with. And especially speaking to my own position of faith, he even talks about the spirits of place. And I look at nature spirits, spirits that are non-human in nature, spirits that live here on this planet, on this plane, and are not upper world or celestial beings. I kind of group nature spirits into the fairy realm, if you will. And so he brings about this idea that when you are at a protest, when you are thinking about environmental issues, is approaching those important spirits of place and spirits of the land and connecting with them and working with them to help empower this cause, this mode of activism that you're taking on. He also goes into the concept that the cause itself can become its own magical thought form, or an egregore, if you will. An egregore is a magical being. It is a spirit that is born. So, for example, if you are taking on environmental activism and you're concerned about the water in Flint, Michigan, the water problem in Flint, Michigan can be a magical being of its own. It can have thoughts and emotions and have a kind of sentience of its own if you're thinking magically. So I really love that idea, and it kind of empowers you to work with the cause itself, to tap into that and delve into it as if this cause were a living being. What does the cause feel? What does the cause need? And it can take you and your activism in a completely new and magical direction that is unique from a mundane point of view. The book is full of activities and spell work and meditations, which I really appreciated. One of my favorites was the soul alignment meditation. That's something that I've actually incorporated into my regular meditation practice. I find it really insightful. It really gets you to delve in deep into your psyche and connect different aspects of yourself and your subconscious, and really brings to light some of the things that are going on within you that you may not have previously harnessed. And I was really curious about the spell for magical resilience. I think that might be because resilience is very much an issue in my life right now. I've been experiencing quite a bit of burnout in my professional life. And within that burnout is just this oppressive overwhelm that I'm feeling all the time. I wanted to see if this very simple suggestion of a spell would get me to calm down and focus. So I am really looking forward to playing more with that as time goes on. So for myself, I really gave myself a very short timeline. I have a very important project that's coming up within a week of filming this video now. So I wanted to cast the spell with that project in mind to help me focus, to give me that resiliency, to kind of break apart that oppressive overwhelm that I've been struggling with lately. So I am really looking forward to seeing the outcome of casting that spell. I would really classify this book as more of an intermediate book, and it's always really great to see something other than a beginner's book. I do appreciate why many authors do steer their books towards a basic audience, because they want to make sure that the book is accessible. They don't want their audience to feel lost and feel like they're wading through material that they don't understand. So I can appreciate why many authors do write very basic, very beginner style books. But he really does a wonderful job of keeping things simple, keeping things understandable. I think that if you don't have a lot of magical experience, you would not feel lost in reading this book. But why I think this is intermediate is it's very directed, it's very specific. Obviously, this is all about activism and how you can incorporate magic into your passions and your need for justice and pursuing what is right for the collaborative world. So this is a very specific book, which to me makes it more intermediate. And within this book, he does introduce what most people would classify as advanced magic. I mentioned briefly egregores and thought forms, which are magically created entities. So instead of a thought form or an egregore existing like a nature spirit or a fairy spirit or a deceased person who's a spirit, these sentient creatures are designed and programmed by a witch or a magical practitioner. So they are considered to be more advanced magic. So he spends some time speaking about that type of magic and how you can incorporate that into activism, which I liked the idea, but the only thing about this book that I didn't really like is his discussion of egregores and thought forms. I loved this book. Let me just first say that. I loved this book. Highly recommend. I do. However, I have to say that I disagree with some of the things that David Salisbury says about egregores and thought forms. I use that type of magic all the time, and I feel like there's a lot of miscommunication and a lot of drama. Ah! Oh my God, they're so scary, they're so bad! I don't agree with that at all. I think egregores and servitors and thought forms are wonderful magical tools. I highly recommend them. I just don't think that they're the dramatic, dangerous thing that everybody says they are. And so one of the things that he says in this book, it's important to destroy it. Thought forms left to their own devices are said to run the risk of going rogue. So scary. I have my own opinions on that. I think I made a video about that. I'll link that in the cards above my head if I remember what video I talked about that on. If you want to learn more about egregores and thought forms, I would say that better books would be Magical Servitors by Damon Brand or Creating Magical Entities by David Michael Cunningham. Those are books that I actually highly recommend for that type of magic. And I just don't think that he had enough time in this book. And that's really, and to be fair, this book isn't really about thought forms or egregores. It's about using that type of magic in activism. So to be fair, that's not the focus of this book. The other thing is, once again, I disagree with David Salisbury. He talks about using angels and them being safe beings to work with. America is heavily Christianized. I know that we like to believe that we have freedom of religion and that we have separation of church and state. We don't. It's 2022. Another great reason to be reading this book now, if you're American, is the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which, I got news for you, is largely due to the fact that church is invading the state in America. So there's that. So I disagree. I don't think that angels are really all that safe. I don't think that they really care much about humans, like the way, there's this idea that they care so much about humanity. I don't really think they do. I work with what I call fairy spirits. Fairy spirits, to me, are on this plane. They live here. They live on the earth. If we ever develop the technology to go to, for instance, Mars, I believe that there will be other types of spirits that live on Mars. So these beings that live here, the fairies, the nature spirits, the spirits of place, they live here. They are more invested, I think, in humanity than angels are, because angels live, they live somewhere else. So, and I don't think they care. I think that they probably exist. I don't have any desire to work with them, though. So I disagree. I don't think that angels are this safe being to work with. I actually think that is a huge influence from Western culture. But overall, I think that this is a great book. I think it's an excellent book to include in your magical library. If you are a person that believes in activism, if you are currently a social justice warrior, definitely, and you are a magical practitioner, this is going to be a must-have, I think. And it can also help you think about activism in smaller ways. It took me a very long time to record this video because I mentioned at the beginning that I really got this book because of the war in Ukraine and how that was affecting me and how helpless I felt to contribute to that cause. And as I was reading this book, I kind of got the idea that I was very disconnected from what's happening in the Ukraine. And that maybe my magical work was better served closer to home. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to completely ignore what's happening in the Ukraine. It's, I can definitely still donate money. I can definitely still write letters to my senators regarding that. But as I was reading this book, it just made me think more and more and more about the professional situation that I've mentioned that is creating this sense of overwhelm for me personally. And I thought to myself as I was reading this book that really before I can direct magical energy to a cause outside of my frame of influence, I probably needed to clear the clutter in my own world first. So I really began to think that my activism probably should be directed more towards police reform, because that's actually my current world and my current frame of influence. So it was very hard for me to come to that realization. And that was one thing that doesn't really come up in this book, but I think that it's implied is that I think people really need to think about activism in terms of their own pain points. You've got to make it personal, and especially in witchcraft, in magic. Magic is personal. So you've got to really invest, and it's got to be close to your heart for it to really have the greatest impact. If you like this video, I think that you would also enjoy my book review of Anatomy of a Witch by Laura Tempest Sackroft. I also invite you to visit my website and follow me on social media. Once again, those handles and links will be for you in the description box. And with that, have a magical day and get out there and get into activism. Change the world.